What's
So
going on over there?
I was doing my run to 100,
Right.
right at about 90 feet, broke through something.
Wow. You got an open space 90 feet below grade?
Right.
What if the greatest treasure mystery in history has finally been solved? After years of dead ends, impossible setbacks, and millions of dollars spent, Rick and Marty Lagina may have uncovered the discovery that changes everything. Experts are calling it one of the most astonishing finds ever linked to Oak Island, and if the evidence is accurate, its estimated value could exceed $150 million. But the price tag isn't what makes this discovery extraordinary. Hidden beneath layers of earth, stone, and centuries of unanswered questions lies evidence that could completely rewrite the history of Oak Island. Some believe it points to legendary treasure. Others think it could reveal a forgotten chapter of history that has remained buried for generations. So, what exactly did Rick and Marty uncover? Why has this discovery ignited fierce debate among historians and treasure experts? And could this finally expose the legendary secret hidden beneath the island? Before we reveal the evidence, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because we bring you the most fascinating mysteries, archaeological discoveries, and hidden history from around the world. Stay with us, because what you're about to see may challenge everything we thought we knew about Oak Island. From mysterious underground tunnels and astonishing artifacts to long-hidden clues that have puzzled treasure hunters for more than 2 centuries, we're uncovering every piece of the puzzle. Let's uncover the truth, one clue at a time. A dense blanket of Atlantic fog creeps across the shoreline, swallowing the aging dock and weaving silently through the trees. The damp, icy air cuts straight through clothing, yet inside the war room, the atmosphere feels charged with anticipation rather than cold. Rick and Marty Lagina stand shoulder to shoulder over a large wooden table scattered with maps, laptops, handwritten notes, and coffee cups long since forgotten. At the center of the room, a sonar monitor flickers with an eerie green glow, illuminating their focused faces. The screen displays a signal unlike anything the team has encountered throughout decades of searching Oak Island. The reading is so unusually powerful that the equipment briefly loses power each time the signal peaks. The coordinates settle on a quiet section of the island, untouched by major excavation for more than a century and a half. Nothing appears remarkable on the surface except a weathered cedar post, leaning slightly as though it has been guarding the location for generations. Marty studies the data in silence. The density is far beyond anything expected from natural rock formations. According to the readings, the object below could be an enormous mass of refined metal, or something even more difficult to explain. Without looking away from the screen, Rick reaches behind him for an old leather-bound journal. Its cracked cover and yellowed pages reveal its age. Opening to a bookmarked entry dated 1795, he quietly reads a nearly faded passage describing the buried son of Solomon, hidden where the sea flows beneath the earth. The room falls silent. What makes the journal even more unsettling is that the description matches the exact location of the sonar anomaly, positioned beside one of Oak Island's mysterious flood tunnel systems. The elaborate channels believed to have been built to flood any unauthorized excavation within moments. Engineers caution that drilling this area carries enormous risk. One mistake could trigger flooding, collapse underground passages, destroy expensive equipment, or endanger the entire operation. Yet neither Rick nor Marty hesitates. Opportunities like this come once in a lifetime, and they know they're too close to turn back now. The decision is made. This will become the team's next excavation site. Several hours later, attention shifts from the sonar display to a massive digital map projected across another monitor. Doug Crowell carefully overlays a centuries-old maritime chart onto the newly recorded coordinates. As the images align, everyone notices the same remarkable detail. A tiny handwritten mark sits directly over the anomaly. Barely visible are 2 Latin words, sanctum aurum, holy gold. Doug explains that the chart dates back to the closing years of the Templar era during the 14th century. Marty responds by producing another document, a translated fragment recovered from a little-known French court record. The text describes the final days before the Knights Templar were dismantled, claiming ships loaded with valuable cargo departed for lands beyond the Western Ocean. Those vessels vanished from recorded history, Yet modern studies of Atlantic currents suggest medieval ships could have crossed the ocean and reached Nova Scotia in less than 3 weeks under favorable conditions. If true, Mahone Bay could have provided the perfect hidden landing place. The team's ground-penetrating radar adds another surprising layer to the mystery. Directly beneath the sonar target lies a large underground chamber. Even more remarkable, its walls appear to consist of alternating layers of granite and crushed quartz. Nature doesn't build structures like this. The design appears intentional, an engineering solution capable of resisting excavation while confusing early detection methods. The deeper the investigation goes, the clearer the picture becomes. Whatever lies below wasn't simply buried, it was deliberately protected. As darkness settles across Oak Island, towering floodlights illuminate the excavation site. Heavy machinery rumbles into position, while steel cables tighten and hydraulic systems hiss under pressure. Diesel engines roar through the night as the massive drill, built to cut through both solid rock and ancient masonry, begins lowering toward the target. The first 20 feet pass through peat and tightly packed soil, layer after layer giving way beneath the rotating drill. Everything proceeds normally. Then, around 35 feet below the surface, the sound suddenly changes. The sharp cutting noise slows into a deep grinding vibration. The drill has reached something different. Dense blue-gray clay. Rick immediately recognizes it. Years earlier, nearly identical clay had been recovered from the money pit, material completely foreign to Nova Scotia's natural geology. Laboratory testing indicated it originated hundreds of miles inland and had been transported here before being compacted into a nearly waterproof barrier. Whoever built this system invested an extraordinary amount of effort simply to protect what lay beneath. Such an undertaking seems far beyond the capabilities of ordinary 18th century settlers. But for a wealthy medieval organization possessing ships, manpower, and advanced engineering knowledge, the task becomes far more believable. The drill continues pushing deeper while thick slurry begins flowing back toward the surface. Floodlights reflect off the muddy mixture as it pours through the return line. Then someone notices something unusual. Tiny golden particles shimmer inside the slurry, flashing brilliantly each time they pass beneath the lights. Marty leans in for a closer look. This doesn't resemble natural gold-bearing ore. The particles appear refined, as though fragments of processed gold are being carried upward by the drilling process itself. Excitement spreads rapidly across the site, but so does concern. Moments later, the returning slurry begins releasing bubbles, not randomly, but in slow, steady pulses, almost as though something deep below is responding to the disturbance. The bubbling continued in a slow, steady rhythm, almost like a giant heartbeat rising from somewhere beneath the island. It wasn't the kind of pressure release the drilling crew had encountered before. This felt controlled, deliberate, as if something deep underground was reacting to their presence. Rick looked across the platform toward Marty. Between them, the muddy slurry swirled with tiny flashes of gold. Neither brother said a word, yet both seemed to reach the same unsettling conclusion. Whatever was hidden beneath Oak Island had just revealed its presence. Moments later, the winch strained as another core sample emerged from the borehole. Mud and water streamed from the metal tube while the crew gathered around. Then, a bright reflection caught everyone's attention. Embedded inside the core wasn't just another fragment. It was a solid, carefully crafted gold panel. The team handled it with extreme caution, gently lifting it free before placing it into a padded evidence case. Even before laboratory testing, its surprising weight suggested this was no ordinary artifact. Several hours later, under the brilliant lights of the temporary field laboratory, the panel rested securely inside an examination tray. Gold dust still sparkled across the workbench, while the engraved cross at its center reflected every beam of light. Although the edges had been scarred and distorted by centuries of crushing pressure underground, the face of the object remained remarkably preserved. There was almost no corrosion, as though it had been sealed away from moisture and time itself. The lab fell completely silent as technicians completed their first analysis. The result appeared on the monitor: 99.9% pure gold. No one spoke. The alloy composition matched gold used in coins produced under the Portuguese crown during the period when the Knights Templar still held influence in the early 14th century. The similarity was too precise to ignore. This wasn't simply valuable, it carried historical significance. Studying the engraved cross more closely, Marty noticed something extraordinary. It wasn't an artistic imitation or a modern recreation. Every line, proportion, and subtle carving matched funeral engravings found on medieval stone tombs in Tomar, Portugal, the city long considered one of the final strongholds of the Knights Templar. It almost seemed as though the panel had once belonged to a sacred Templar relic before somehow finding its way beneath Oak Island. The silence inside the laboratory was suddenly broken by a burst of static from the site radio. Marty calmly reported the laboratory results to the drilling crew. Then everything changed. A deep vibration echoed through the bedrock below. At first it sounded like distant thunder. Loose gravel trembled beneath their boots while the steel platform carried the vibration upward. With each passing second, the sound became stronger. Rick stopped instantly. His expression changed. He remembered reading something similar years earlier in an old manuscript attributed to the Templars, a document sometimes referred to as the Shannon Parchment. One line had stayed with him ever since. The vault shall answer intrusion as the horn answers the hunter. Standing inside the dimly lit tent, the warning suddenly felt far less symbolic. If the chamber below had truly been designed with defensive mechanisms, perhaps they had just activated one. Outside, the equipment immediately reflected the change. Pressure gauges on the drilling rig surged unpredictably before a powerful rush of water exploded upward through the borehole from an unseen passage below. Amid the chaos, another remarkable object emerged, a heavy gold ingot. Stamped across its surface was a beautifully preserved Crusader's cross with fleur-de-lis-shaped ends, every detail still remarkably sharp despite its age. Below the emblem, a series of carefully engraved numbers wound across the bar. They didn't resemble ordinary mint markings. Rick examined them closely, running a finger across the shallow grooves. The symbols appeared ceremonial, almost devotional, suggesting they served a purpose beyond simple identification. Even more surprising, the gold still felt slightly warm. Laboratory instruments later confirmed that the remaining heat came from the friction generated as the bar was extracted from deep underground. Doug scanned the ingot with a portable XRF analyzer. Once again, the gold purity measured exceptionally high. But another discovery surprised everyone. Tiny chemical traces remained trapped within microscopic imperfections in the metal itself. Frankincense, myrrh, and faint organic compounds consistent with aged olive oil. The laboratory team immediately recognized the combination. Similar residue profiles have been documented on ceremonial objects associated with medieval religious traditions. If that interpretation proved correct, this ingot may once have formed part of a sacred vessel, a chalice, a reliquary, or another object used in religious ceremonies before eventually being melted down and recast into a gold bar. Rick stared quietly at the artifact. If this really came from a Templar sanctuary, he murmured, then every bar still below could represent something sacred that was melted down and transformed into a hidden treasury. His words carried both fascination and unease. This was no longer just about treasure. It was about history itself. The downhole camera had already captured brief flashes of additional objects before the recovery tool secured the first ingot. There were many more below. Each glimmer hinted at another massive gold bar waiting inside the chamber. Even using conservative market estimates, the total value of the collection could reach well into the hundreds of millions of dollars. When the camera descended a second time, the images became even more astonishing. Rows upon rows of neatly stacked gold bars stretched across the chamber floor with remarkable precision. Nearby stood massive iron-bound chests, their surfaces covered in centuries of rust, yet still structurally intact. Between them rested ornate reliquaries decorated with ruby gemstones and intricate vine-like patterns carved into their gilded frames. Marty quietly calculated the numbers in his head. "That's at least $150 million in raw gold alone," he whispered. "And if historical value is included—" He stopped speaking. The final figure was almost impossible to imagine. Rick remained focused on the live camera feed. "Think about what that amount of wealth could have financed centuries ago," he said softly. "Ships, expeditions, entire settlements, perhaps long before Columbus ever crossed the Atlantic." The brothers exchanged a silent look. Both realized the historical implications might prove even greater than the treasure itself. Then the camera revealed something else. Carved into the far wall was a stone alcove holding 2 engraved tablets. Their surfaces were covered with tightly arranged Latin inscriptions, radiating outward in intricate geometric designs. The symmetry appeared intentional, patterns often associated with sacred geometry, motifs linked throughout history to medieval cathedrals, religious symbolism, and secret traditions. Then, slowly, another object came into view. Resting inside an aged cedar chest lined with decayed velvet sat what appeared to be an ornate chalice. As the camera light swept across its weathered surface, the moment the camera revealed the contents of the chamber, nobody spoke. For a few seconds, the only sound was the steady hum of the equipment echoing through the darkness. Scattered among rows of gold-rested objects that seemed even more extraordinary, ancient ceremonial pieces, ornate weapons, and relics whose craftsmanship suggested they belonged to another age entirely. Their true value wasn't measured in precious metal, it was measured in the history they represented. Rick stared at the monitor without taking his eyes off it. "If these objects are authentic," he said quietly, "we're looking at evidence that could reshape everything we thought we knew." In that instant, the gold became almost secondary. Treasure can be counted, history cannot. As news of the discovery slowly reached a handful of trusted experts, the atmosphere around Oak Island changed overnight. Security increased, access became tightly restricted, and every movement on the island was carefully monitored. Official inquiries began arriving from organizations eager to understand exactly what had been uncovered. No public announcement had been made, yet somehow, people already knew something important had happened. The crew continued their work with equal parts excitement and caution. Every new artifact was photographed, cataloged, and carefully preserved before leaving the site. Nothing was rushed. Every decision carried enormous responsibility. Then another surprise emerged. Near the base of the chamber, cameras captured a massive carved stone, unlike anything the team had seen before. Its intricate symbols appeared intentionally placed, almost as though whoever built the vault wanted future visitors to stop and think before going any farther. Whether it was a warning, a marker, or simply a ceremonial carving, nobody could say with certainty. But its presence reminded everyone of one simple fact. This chamber had never been intended to be found. Later that evening, the team gathered to discuss what should happen next. Opinions differed. Some believed the excavation should continue immediately, while others argued that preserving the site was just as important as exploring it. After a long silence, Rick finally spoke. "We don't have to uncover everything tonight." The room fell quiet. If this place has remained hidden for centuries, another few months, or even another year, won't change its story. Let's protect what we've found before we chase what's still waiting below. One by one, the others agreed. The most significant artifacts were secured for scientific examination, while much of the chamber remained untouched until future investigations could be carried out under carefully controlled conditions. As dawn approached, a thick blanket of fog drifted across the island, slowly swallowing the floodlights and covering the excavation once again. Standing at the shoreline, Rick watched the mist roll over the water. "It feels like the island is keeping part of its secret," he said. "And maybe that's exactly what it was meant to do." Whether Oak Island truly hides one final treasure or something even more important remains unanswered. But one thing is certain, the mystery isn't over. If anything, this discovery has opened an entirely new chapter. If you enjoyed this journey into one of history's greatest mysteries, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There are still countless unanswered questions buried beneath the surface, and we'll be here to explore every new clue as it appears. But even after the vault was secured, one mystery refused to disappear. As engineers reviewed every scan collected during the excavation, they noticed a series of faint anomalies extending beyond the chamber itself. At first, they assumed the readings were nothing more than interference caused by the dense rock surrounding the site. Yet, repeated scans kept producing the same pattern. There was something deeper, something larger. The newly discovered vault appeared to end in solid stone, but the imaging hinted at narrow voids continuing far below, almost as though the chamber was only the entrance to a much older underground complex. No one rushed to announce the discovery. The team had learned that extraordinary claims demanded extraordinary evidence. Every image was checked, every measurement repeated, and every interpretation challenged before anyone dared suggest what it might mean. Late that evening, Rick stood quietly over the updated survey maps. After several minutes of silence, he looked toward Marty and asked a question that changed the mood of the entire room. What if this wasn't the destination? No one answered. If the vault was only one section of a much larger structure, then the greatest secret of Oak Island might still remain untouched.